Alcohol isn't what you think it is. It's not just a harmless drink. It's not merely a way to unwind after a long, exhausting day. It's not simply something to help you loosen up, laugh more easily, or feel a little braver on a Friday night. No, alcohol is something far more deceptive. Behind the polished glasses, the fancy labels, and the celebratory toasts, there's something hidden, something ancient, something powerful, and something dangerous. Alcohol is not about fun or relief. It's a spiritual sedative, a subtle, masked force that gently slips past your awareness and begins to interfere with something much deeper than your thoughts. It doesn't just change how you feel, it reshapes how you connect with yourself. It dulls your intuition, lowers your energetic defenses, and slowly pulls you away from your true essence. Long before you ever poured your first glass, the influence had already begun, through culture, through ritual, through conditioning. And here's the most dangerous part. You were trained to believe it's harmless. Worse, you were trained to believe it's sophisticated, that it's classy, grown up. But this programming runs so deep that you barely notice it happening. It's woven into smiles, into clinking glasses, into every casual cheers. But what if it's all a beautiful trap? What if beneath all those polished rituals, alcohol has been quietly changing your frequency, distorting your alignment with yourself? This isn't about shame. This isn't about rules. This is about waking up to something we've never truly been told. Your frequency has been shifting in ways you were never meant to experience. And here's the thing. This isn't some lecture about health risks, morality, or lifestyle choices. It's about something far more unsettling. Something deeper. Something ancient. Something deliberately buried. Long before alcohol became the background noise of dinner tables, the symbol of celebration at weddings, or the social glue of weekend parties, it was something entirely different. Something sacred. Its origins are not rooted in entertainment but in the corridors of old, guarded wisdom. Hidden wisdom. Mystical understanding passed down in whispers between alchemists, seers, and spiritual initiates. What you casually sip today was once handled with profound caution. But because they understood its true power, not as a beverage, but as a tool. A doorway. A volatile instrument that could open energetic pathways, or close them forever. Most people don't question this shift. They never ask, how did something so powerful become so casual? But maybe you should. Because underneath this normalized habit is a sacred substance rebranded. A ritual turned routine. A ceremony stripped of context. And that shift didn't happen by accident. It was engineered. You've been taught to see it as normal, even necessary. But it wasn't always this way. Those who came before us feared alcohol, not because they were strict or repressed, but because they remembered what it could do when misused. So ask yourself this, what are we really sipping and what was lost when we stopped seeing it for what it was? Within the ancient alchemical traditions, alcohol wasn't merely a drink. It wasn't just a substance to be consumed. It was a process, a symbol, a metaphor wrapped in fire and transformation. The word itself, alcohol, comes from the Arabic term al-kol, which originally described a fine black powder used around the eyes, believed to carry energetic significance. But in the language of alchemists, the meaning went far beyond cosmetics. It represented distillation, the act of separating essence from form, pulling the spirit from matter, extracting what's pure from what's physical. In their eyes, this wasn't just chemistry. It was sacred ritual. That's why even now, we call alcoholic beverages spirits. That's not poetic coincidence. It's a linguistic echo, a residue of forgotten understanding. They believed that the same act that could draw spirit from herbs and substances could also draw your spirit out of alignment if misused. The idea was simple but profound. Distillation symbolized death and rebirth. But like fire, its power depended on how it was used. Reckless use could damage the soul. Consumed without reverence, alcohol wasn't just intoxicating, it was soul-extracting. The ancients didn't romanticize it. They didn't treat it lightly. They feared it with respect. Because they knew this was no ordinary liquid. It was a bridge between dimensions. A blade that could heal or cut too deep. What happens when we take that blade and use it carelessly? It wasn't meant for casual entertainment. It wasn't designed to pair with snacks or to fill awkward silences at parties. In its original context, alcohol was a sacred instrument, a tool of transformation reserved only for the initiated. Only those who had undergone rigorous spiritual preparation, who were trained to navigate altered states responsibly, were permitted to work with it. It was never handed out freely. It was never trivialized. The risk of misuse was not theoretical. It was well understood. One wrong step could sever your grounding, unbind your spirit from its higher self, or open energetic portals that couldn't easily be closed. This wasn't superstition. This was spiritual technology, and it demanded reverence. But today, all of that has been forgotten, or worse, deliberately erased. We treat alcohol like a harmless product. It's poured in celebration, consumed in excess, and marketed with glamour, sophistication, and seductive ease. The ceremonial vessel has become a plastic cup. The sacred has been rebranded for convenience. But the essence hasn't changed. Its energetic impact is still as volatile as it ever was. It still carries the power to distort your connection with self and spirit. The only difference now is that we've lost the context, the wisdom, the rituals, the safeguards. So while the world laughs and clinks glasses, something ancient watches silently, wondering when we'll remember what we've forgotten. What was once feared for its spiritual volatility is now sold as harmless fun, repackaged, rebranded, forgotten. And this collective forgetting has left us vulnerable, exposed in ways most people can't even begin to recognize. Because alcohol doesn't simply relax your mind. It doesn't just take the edge off or make you more social. It's not simply confidence in a cup. Every sip subtly shifts your frequency. Every swallow disrupts your energetic field, even if you can't see it. Slowly, softly, it fractures the delicate balance that holds your spiritual alignment together. The ancients warned about this, not with scolding, but with sacred caution. But today, we drink blindly, without awareness, without reverence, and most dangerously, without protection. This isn't just about liver damage or addiction. It's about what alcohol does to your soul. That's why almost no one talks about it. Because questioning alcohol isn't just questioning a drink, it's questioning a cultural cornerstone, a lifestyle, a deeply embedded piece of modern programming. It's not just a habit, it's a ritual we no longer realize we're performing. And here's the twist. The more we normalize it, the harder it becomes to see its impact. It hides behind laughter, behind toasts, behind celebration. But underneath all that, something far more subtle is happening. And once it starts, most people don't even know how far they've drifted. Challenging alcohol isn't just about breaking a habit, it's about questioning one of the most deeply embedded cultural programs we've ever known. It's more than asking yourself, should I drink less? It's about unraveling the illusion that what we've been sold is actually serving us. We've been conditioned to see alcohol as harmless or even beneficial. It's wrapped in sophistication, linked to confidence, status, and charm. It shows up in our movies, our celebrations, even our grief. But what if all of that is an illusion? What if the clarity and connection we truly seek have been quietly buried beneath this global ritual of forgetting? Some of what we've uncovered about alcohol's esoteric roots is too sensitive, too complex, too far from the mainstream to fully share here. That's why we created Insights Academy, so we could go deeper, so we could talk about what's not being talked about. There's a reason these teachings have been suppressed. There's a reason very few spiritual seekers are told the full story. Because when you start to see what alcohol really is, what it really does, it doesn't just shift your relationship with drinking. It shifts your entire perception of reality. It's not about shame. It's about awareness. It's about remembering that we weren't always like this. That once, long ago, alcohol wasn't a weekend habit. It was a sacred tool used with caution, reverence, and responsibility. And we've forgotten. But something inside you still remembers. Alcohol has always been more than a beverage. It's not just a drink, it's an energetic solvent. A substance that doesn't only dissolve tension in the body, but also gently erodes the protective barriers of your spiritual core. In ancient times, it was used carefully, in sacred rituals, by those who were spiritually prepared. Under those conditions, it could unlock hidden doors, access points to higher states of consciousness, portals to insight and transformation. But here's the danger. Those same doors, when opened casually or recklessly, don't just let wisdom in. They let everything else in too. Most people don't even realize those doors exist. They think alcohol is only about relaxation or fun. But behind that easy laughter, behind the lightness and the loosened inhibitions, something deeper is happening. Because unlike a hangover that fades by morning, the energetic consequences of drinking don't always go away. They stick around, invisible, subtle, and cumulative. You may feel more open, more social, more alive in the moment. But what you don't see is the price you're paying in silence. The weakening of your field, the confusion of your inner compass, the small cracks in your alignment that widen over time. And the harm? It doesn't come crashing in. It comes quietly, slowly, in ways that feel like freedom, but aren't. You feel lighter, freer. You laugh louder, talk faster, open up more easily. But behind that temporary euphoria, something else is happening. Something subtle but serious. The threads that keep you grounded, the invisible ties that hold your intuition, discernment, and sovereignty together, are loosening. Each drink makes your energy field just a little more porous. Your clarity dims just slightly. And because the experience feels pleasurable in the moment, you don't notice the erosion taking place beneath the surface. That's the danger. Alcohol doesn't feel like a threat, it feels like a friend. It mirrors the connection we long for. But it's a counterfeit version, a shortcut that comes with hidden costs. You think you're becoming more yourself, more open, more confident. But in reality, you may be drifting further from your core. And the longer you live in that altered version of yourself, the harder it becomes to remember what alignment truly feels like. It's like getting lost in a dream so convincing, you forget you're dreaming at all. This isn't about judgment. It's not about blame. It's about waking up. Because not all pleasures are nourishing. Some are distractions dressed up as healing. Some are traps that feel like freedom. And alcohol? It's one of the most seductive traps of all. Not because it's loud, but because it whispers. The longer you live in that altered version of yourself, the more natural it starts to feel. You begin to forget the clarity you once knew. The groundedness. The deep knowing. It slips away slowly, quietly, until disconnection becomes your new normal. You start to believe that version of you, the one that second-guesses everything, the one that's just a little more reactive, a little more scattered, is simply who you are. But it's not. It's a byproduct, a distortion, a consequence of energetic erosion that's gone unnoticed for too long. This isn't about shame. This is about seeing clearly. When you understand what alcohol really does, not just to your body or your brain, but to your energy, you start to understand why ancient traditions treated it with such careful reverence. They weren't being uptight or puritanical. They were protecting something far more precious than your liver. They were protecting your soul. Because most people only think about alcohol's effects in physical terms: slurred speech, lack of balance, a foggy head. But the real disruption doesn't happen in your limbs or your logic. It happens in the layer of you that's invisible to the eye, but central to your being. That's where the damage begins. And because it's subtle, most people never even realize it's happening. You are not just flesh and thought. You are vibration. You are frequency. A constantly shifting field of energy, receiving, radiating, responding to everything around you. At every moment, you are more than skin and bone. You are a subtle system, a dynamic interface between the physical and the spiritual. But alcohol? It changes that field. Not in a way you can see, not in a way a blood test will show, but in a way that affects everything. Your clarity, your intuition, your sense of direction, your ability to feel your truth. Your energetic system, your aura, your light body, isn't just some mystical idea. It's the actual architecture of your spiritual sovereignty. It's the framework that holds your discernment, your insight, your sensitivity. It filters the noise and tunes you into your own signal. And when that field is healthy, you feel aligned, connected. There's a deep sense of knowing, of being in the right place at the right time as the right version of yourself. But when it weakens, when it fractures, things start to shift. You become more vulnerable, not just emotionally, but energetically. You begin absorbing what doesn't belong to you. You lose touch with your internal compass. That's what alcohol disrupts, not just your mind, but your field. The thing you didn't even know was keeping you safe. When your field is strong, you feel grounded, aligned, awake. You move through the world with a quiet confidence, guided by an internal sense of truth. But when that field fractures, when it begins to weaken, you become open in all the wrong ways. You don't just lose focus. You lose protection. Alcohol doesn't just slow your speech or fog your mind. It creates tiny, almost imperceptible tears in your energetic structure. These aren't dramatic explosions. They're subtle punctures. Small rips in the very fabric that keeps you whole. And through those openings, energies seep in. Thoughts that aren't yours. Emotions that feel foreign. Old patterns that resurface without explanation. Even parasitic influences, energetic entities that thrive in disconnection, can find their way in. It's not about fear. It's about understanding. Because when your aura becomes porous, your boundaries soften. What once bounced off now sinks in. You begin to carry weight that isn't yours. Feel doubt that didn't originate inside you. And because it happens gradually, you rarely notice. One drink doesn't shatter you. But drink after drink, week after week, something begins to shift. You're not just tired. You're subtly compromised. And most people, they never see it coming. Because the harm isn't dramatic. It's delicate, invisible, but no less real. The change doesn't happen all at once. It's not some dramatic collapse. It's a slow unraveling. Most people never notice. But one of the first signs that your energetic structure is weakening is this. Your intuition goes quiet. That inner voice, the one that used to whisper warnings, offer clarity, or point you back toward alignment, becomes harder to hear. You second-guess more often. You feel just a little more reactive, a little less stable. And with time, that subtle drift becomes your default. You start confusing disconnection for identity. But this isn't who you truly are. It's not the real you. It's a version shaped by spiritual erosion, masked as personality. You become the echo of clarity instead of its source. And the disruption isn't random. Different parts of your energy system suffer in different ways. Your root chakra, which governs grounding and survival, becomes overstimulated. You crave more stimulation, more escape. Your drives grow louder. At the same time, your crown chakra, your link to higher guidance, begins to close off. The result? You feel more tethered to what's shallow and more distant from what's sacred. That's what alcohol does. Not loudly, not instantly, but softly, persistently, until the version of you that once felt whole becomes a fading memory. And unless you pause, unless you truly feel into it, you may never even notice it's happening. Your chakra, the bridge to higher consciousness, begins to dull. The light dims, the signal weakens. The pathways that once allowed you to access states of clarity and elevated awareness start to narrow, like arteries slowly closing. You may feel very alive in your body, grounded, even excited, but that sense of connection to your higher self fades. That's the trade-off. Alcohol offers a brief sense of grounding, but it comes at the expense of spiritual clarity. And because alcohol's effects are socially celebrated, the damage goes unnoticed. Worse, it's normalized. You're encouraged to drink to loosen up, to be more open, to connect. But what's really happening? Your energetic boundaries are being lowered. Yes, you become more open, but not in a way that heals. You become open in a way that exposes. You're not just sharing your heart, you're absorbing your environment. Taking on emotional debris that doesn't belong to you, carrying the weight of other people's unresolved pain, unconscious thoughts, fragmented energy. And the longer it goes on, the harder it becomes to reverse. Your meditation feels foggy. Your dreams lose their clarity. Stillness becomes uncomfortable, even impossible. You mistake this growing disconnection as part of who you are, but it's not. The further you drift from your higher self, the more distorted your reflection becomes. And yet, no one told you this was happening. Over time, the signals grow dimmer. Your meditation becomes foggier, no longer a space of stillness, but of distraction. Your dreams twist into confusion, chaotic and distant. The sharp instincts that once guided you now feel muted, unreliable, like radio static where once there was a clear channel. Sitting in silence becomes uncomfortable. You can't quite find center. The noise inside is too loud, the clarity too far away. That disconnection has become your new baseline. And in that space, something dangerous takes root. You begin to believe that alcohol helps. That it's the source of your confidence, your creativity, your freedom. You start reaching for it not just to celebrate, but to perform. To feel something again. To feel like yourself again. But that feeling? That fire? It was never alcohol. It was always you. What alcohol does is suppress the noise, temporarily. It quiets the fear, silences the inner critic, lifts the veil just enough to let a glimpse of your true self shine through. But here's the trap. After that moment of illusion, alcohol adds its own noise. It buries you even deeper beneath the debris it helped you forget. And so the cycle begins again. You wake up scattered, heavy, a little off, not quite yourself. And because you were never taught to recognize energetic damage, you reach back for the very thing that caused the fracture, thinking it might fix what it broke. If you've ever felt like alcohol unlocked a version of you that's more expressive, more alive, more free, you're not imagining it. That version exists. But what you're tapping into isn't the arrival of your authentic self. It's the retreat of your spiritual defenses. It's not confidence. It's exposure. The parts of you that were once guarded by clarity, discernment, and energetic sovereignty step aside, just long enough for you to feel uninhibited. But with that exposure comes a price. Because you're not just opening to joy, you're opening to everything. Energies that don't belong to you. Emotions that aren't yours. Influences that shape you subtly, invisibly. And the more you drink to feel more like yourself, the further you drift from who you truly are. It's a perfect illusion. Alcohol lifts the veil just enough to make you feel seen, yet clouds you just enough to stop you from seeing clearly. This is the exchange that almost no one calculates. The temporary high feels empowering, but it's simply the absence of resistance, not the presence of truth. And when you live in that illusion long enough, it becomes your default reality. You mistake the false self for the real one. And eventually, you forget that your authenticity never needed alcohol to begin with. It just needed space, clean, clear, sacred space, to breathe again. The cost of exposure isn't just emotional, it's energetic. And most people never calculate that cost. Because the manipulation of your energy field doesn't require your permission. It doesn't even require your awareness. Just like gravity, energetic principles don't need you to believe in them to function. They're not based on opinion. They're based on laws, subtle, invisible, yet absolutely real. Whether or not you believe in auras, they exist. Whether or not you understand chakras, their mechanics still apply. Your disbelief doesn't deactivate the system. It just makes you more vulnerable to it. Alcohol alters your state, not just chemically, but vibrationally. It pulls you out of harmony and into distortion. And in that altered vibration, you become available, accessible, to energies that were previously held at bay. The ones your field used to repel now slip in without resistance. This is the side of alcohol that no one talks about. Because to acknowledge this truth is to unravel one of the most powerful cultural scripts ever written, the myth that alcohol is harmless, even essential, to living a full life. But once you feel what's happening, once you see it, you can't unsee it. The veil lifts, the illusion shatters, and you realize you were never just drinking. You were opening a door. The question is, to what? This is the part no one tells you. The layer of vulnerability that never gets mentioned. Because if people truly understood what was happening behind the scenes, what alcohol does to the soul, to your energetic sovereignty, it would shatter one of the most profitable cultural illusions ever sold. The illusion that alcohol is harmless, that it's essential, that it belongs at every celebration, every gathering, every moment of joy or pain. That without it, something is missing. But once you begin to see through that illusion, everything changes. You notice what others miss, the subtle shift, the dulling of presence, the way people reach for their glass not just for fun, but to feel something they've forgotten how to access naturally. You weren't born craving alcohol. You didn't enter this world searching for a bottle. That impulse was taught, layered into your psyche through repetition, exposure, and culture. From your earliest memories, alcohol was framed not as a toxin, but as a symbol of adulthood, of freedom, of celebration. It became a rite of passage you never questioned because you were conditioned to expect it before you could even speak. What happens when you begin to question the script? You realize it was never really yours. It was handed to you, polished, rehearsed, sold as truth. And now, you finally have a chance to rewrite it. Think back. Try to remember the earliest moments that shaped your understanding of alcohol. The family gatherings where glasses clinked and adults laughed while children watched silently. The movie scenes where the confident hero sipped whiskey before facing danger. The sitcoms where heartbreaks were soothed and victories toasted with a drink. These weren't just random moments. They were instructions, rehearsals, repetition designed to make alcohol feel inevitable. Each time you saw alcohol paired with joy, power, sex appeal, or connection, the script embedded itself a little deeper. Not through warning, but through glamorization. The message was simple. This is what adults do. This is how they cope. This is what confidence looks like. By the time you reached legal drinking age, the decision had already been made for you. Reaching for a drink didn't feel like a choice. It felt like the next step. Like checking a box you didn't remember agreeing to. And the system? It never needed to force you. It just needed to repeat itself. Over and over. Until your subconscious linked alcohol to everything you crave. Celebration, belonging, love, relief. This is how deep the program runs. Not as command, but suggestion. Not as truth, but familiarity. So the question is not whether you chose alcohol. The question is, who wrote the script you're living? Advertising agencies, film studios, corporations. They've spent billions, literally billions, studying human psychology more deeply than most people ever study themselves. Not to help you heal, but to sell you a feeling. They knew from the beginning, if you want someone to drink, don't tell them to do it. Show them beautiful people doing it. Let the message be soft, subtle, seductive. You've seen it 1,000 times. Laughing friends clinking glasses under warm lights. A romantic date sealed with wine. A character gaining courage from a shot before making a bold move. It's never shown as dependency. It's shown as charm. And over time, that repetition works. Not because it forces you, but because it bypasses your defenses. It teaches you that alcohol isn't just a drink. It's joy, confidence, belonging. It becomes emotionally entangled with your milestones, your birthdays, your promotions, your heartbreaks, your holidays. The drink becomes a ritual, and rituals shape identity. Eventually, the lines blur. You're not sure if you're celebrating with alcohol, or if alcohol is the thing you're celebrating. It becomes part of your emotional script, written so smoothly into your life that you stop asking how it got there. And the genius of it all? You think you chose it. But really, it was embedded long before you ever called it your choice. This is why so many people struggle to enjoy a wedding, a night out, or even a simple dinner without alcohol. The connection between joy and drinking has been wired so deeply that without it, the moment feels incomplete. That's how thoroughly the system has done its job. Alcohol isn't just in your fridge, it's in your emotions. It's been woven into the very fabric of your identity. You drink to celebrate, to mourn, to relax, to escape, to connect. There's a drink for every mood, every occasion. And behind that emotional versatility lies the trap. The illusion that alcohol is an extension of who you are. But it isn't. It's an overlay, a lens, a filter between you and your real experience. One that dulls the rawness, flattens the authenticity, and replaces your natural emotional responses with scripted ones. Even the language we use betrays the programming. Take the edge off. Loosen up. Have a few to unwind. These phrases aren't neutral. They frame alcohol as the solution, not the problem. They normalize dependence while disguising vulnerability. And society doesn't shame you for using alcohol to cope, it encourages it. Not because it cares about your well-being, but because it benefits from your disconnection. And when a coping mechanism becomes a cultural ritual, it no longer feels like survival. It feels like normal. This isn't just clever marketing. It's psychological warfare, dressed in celebration. From the very beginning, the system knew, the earlier the conditioning begins, the stronger the grip. And so it starts young, not with alcohol itself, but with the idea of it. Before you ever tasted your first drink, you were already being trained to link consumption with comfort. Remember the happy meals with toys? The sugary drinks with cartoons? The way treats were used as rewards? By the time you reached drinking age, the ritual of emotional consumption was already encoded in you. All that was left was swapping juice boxes for wine glasses. The alcohol industry didn't need to create desire, it only needed to redirect it. From sweetness to sedation. From innocence to escape. You thought reaching for a drink was your decision, but it was a script carefully installed, line by line, scene by scene. The more you laughed, the deeper it rooted. The more you celebrated with it, the more it became part of you. And the most dangerous part? It never felt like programming. It felt like freedom, like choice, like adulthood. But what kind of freedom is it when your desire was designed by someone else? When what you think is you was written by people who profit when you stay just a little bit disconnected? Real freedom doesn't begin with indulgence. It begins with awareness. Without it, what we call choice is often just compliance, wearing a clever disguise. You think you're deciding, but are you? Or are you simply repeating what you were told from the moment you could observe? This is why questioning alcohol feels so deeply uncomfortable. Because it's not just about changing a habit, it's about confronting a belief system, a script, a blueprint for how to feel, how to connect, and who to be. When you start to pull on that thread, everything unravels. You realize that so much of what you thought was you was shaped by a system that never asked what was best for your soul, only what was most profitable. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. You begin to notice how pervasive it all is. The commercials, the songs, the movies, the social rituals. They weren't just reflecting culture, they were writing it, layer by layer, day by day, until alcohol became synonymous with joy, identity, and even love. But what if the real you never needed it? What if everything you were reaching for was already inside you, just buried under layers of suggestion? This is where real sovereignty begins. Not in abstinence alone, but in conscious choice, rooted in truth. When you finally begin to see clearly, something inside you shifts. You realize that alcohol was never about the drink itself. It was always about the disconnect it creates and the system that benefits from that disconnect. Because the truth is, disconnection is profitable. When you're cut off from your inner knowing, your boundaries soften. You become more reactive, more suggestible, more dependent on external things, products, approval, routines, to feel safe, seen, or whole. The system doesn't thrive when you're sovereign. It thrives when you're uncertain. And alcohol plays a subtle but powerful role in keeping you there, not by force, but through ritual, through repetition, through celebration masquerading as consent. That's why questioning alcohol isn't just personal, it's revolutionary. You're not just pushing against a drink. You're pushing against a centuries-old architecture designed to keep you spiritually numb. And here's the truth, you don't need alcohol to be joyful, to connect, to feel. Those capacities are innate. They belong to you. They've always belonged to you. But when you're taught to believe that a bottle holds your freedom, your brilliance, your voice, you slowly give those things away one sip at a time. Waking up isn't easy, but once you do, You start remembering what was never truly gone. Most people, when they talk about alcohol, mention the physical risks. Addiction, liver disease, accidents. And those are real. But they're not the full picture, not even close. Because the deeper harm lives where few ever look. In your energy, in your clarity, in your ability to discern what is you and what's been placed on top of you. You were not born broken. You were not born needing to numb, escape, or suppress your light. Somewhere along the way, you were taught that dulling yourself was normal, that it was adult, that it was sophisticated. But it wasn't true. You are not here to live a numbed version of life. You are not here to dim your energy to fit a world that's forgotten how to feel. You are here to remember, to reconnect, to reclaim the parts of you that were never lost, only buried. Alcohol never gave you your power. It only blurred your vision of it. And now, that vision is clearing. This is where the script ends, not with shame, not with rebellion, but with remembrance. A return to the truth you've always carried inside. The real you was never on the other side of a drink. It was always in the stillness, waiting for you to come home. Every drink you take to silence those messengers delays your growth. The fear you avoid, the tension you escape, the anxiety you push down, they aren't enemies. They're signals. They are the language of your soul, asking to be heard, felt, healed. But instead of listening, you mute them. And the tragedy is, the very pain you suppress holds the key to your liberation. This is the paradox no one teaches you. That discomfort is not something to run from, but to walk through. That emotional tension is not a flaw, but a flashlight. Every time you bypass those inner signals through alcohol, you turn away from your own evolution. And the longer you turn away, the more disconnected you feel. You think the drink is bringing you closer to yourself. But in reality, it's pulling you further from the parts that most need your attention. Healing doesn't happen by silencing pain. It happens by meeting it with compassion. But our culture has trained you otherwise. From childhood, you were taught that pain is dangerous. That vulnerability is weakness. That silence is to be filled, not explored. So when alcohol offers a quick, effortless escape, you say yes. Not because you're broken, but because you were never shown how to face what lives beneath your noise. And until you do, the pattern continues. Drink to feel relief, wake up more lost. And wonder why nothing really changes. You push the discomfort aside temporarily, but you never truly release it. It waits, patiently, beneath the surface of your laughter, beneath the buzz of your social mask, beneath the warmth of your third glass. Unfelt emotions do not disappear. They reorganize. They embed themselves into your body, your behavior, your beliefs. They show up as anxiety in the morning, fatigue in the afternoon, and restlessness at night. They become the quiet reasons you don't feel safe in stillness. The invisible weight you carry without knowing why. Alcohol doesn't erase those emotions. It just shifts your awareness away from them, for a moment. But the pain stays. And with each repetition, your mind begins to associate alcohol with relief. Not healing, not transformation, just temporary escape. That's how the cycle strengthens. You drink not because you love alcohol, but because you want relief. And because you've never been shown another way. The sadness isn't that you reach for comfort. The sadness is that you were taught that alcohol is the fastest way to get there. But healing doesn't come fast. It doesn't come easy. It comes with presence, with patience, with courage. And most importantly, it comes without numbing. Because real transformation doesn't come from suppressing the truth. It comes from walking through it, even when it's uncomfortable, especially when it is. What most people are truly seeking when they drink isn't the alcohol itself. It's the version of themselves they believe it unlocks. The unfiltered, confident, free version. The one who speaks without fear. The one who dances without shame. The one who laughs without apology. But here's the truth. Alcohol doesn't create that version of you. It just temporarily lowers the barriers you've built around it. And when the buzz fades, those walls return, sometimes stronger. You chase the feeling again, mistaking the substance for the source. You weren't trying to get drunk. You were trying to come home to yourself. But because the arrival felt tied to the drink, you believed it lived there. in the bottle, in the bar, in the ritual. And every time you return to alcohol to access that version of you, you reinforce the illusion that you need something outside yourself to feel whole. That's the trap. Not that you enjoy the feeling, but that you forget it was always you behind it. Alcohol just muffled the noise for a moment. The clarity, the courage, the connection, you already had them. You just didn't know how to reach them directly. So instead of healing what blocks your truth, you drink around it, hoping for the shortcut, hoping it won't come with a price. But it always does. You drink to connect, to feel closer, to be seen. And in those moments, it feels like connection is happening. But is it real? Because true connection requires presence, vulnerability, a steady openness that allows two people to meet fully, consciously. Alcohol doesn't deepen your presence. It distorts it. It doesn't sharpen your empathy. It blurs your perception. Yes, it lowers your walls, but it also lowers your awareness. And in that haze, what passes for connection is often just mutual ungrounding. You feel close, but only because the guardrails are gone. Only because everyone's blurred the lines at once. And when the buzz fades, so does the bond. The intimacy that felt profound the night before often dissolves under daylight. You realize that what seemed like truth was tinted by intoxication. The laughs, the tears, the late-night confessions, they felt real, but lacked the foundation to last. That's the danger of counterfeit connection. It's seductive, but fragile. The more often you seek it through alcohol, the harder it becomes to access real connection without it. Your nervous system starts to associate safety and ease with intoxication. And slowly, your sober self starts to feel less than, less confident, less fun, less worthy of love. But the truth is, the real you, the one who can truly connect, was never lost. You just haven't been given the tools to reach that part of you without the fog. The more you rely on alcohol to connect, the more disconnected you become from your sober self. You begin to notice it, subtly at first. A quiet feeling that the real you isn't as bold, as funny, as magnetic. You compare your clear-headed presence to the version of you that shows up with a buzz, and slowly, you start to mistrust yourself. That's how the cycle tightens. Not because you crave alcohol itself, but because you crave who you believe you are when drinking. And when your nervous system begins to link ease, joy, and social fluidity with intoxication, sobriety starts to feel dull. You begin to question your worth when you're clear. You second-guess your expression. You feel awkward in stillness. And without realizing it, you start outsourcing your confidence to a substance. Over time, your social identity forms around the person you are while drinking. The jokes, the stories, the ease. It becomes a mask that's praised, affirmed, and expected. But here's the tragedy. The person underneath, the real you, isn't lesser. They're just quieter, hidden beneath layers of conditioning, fear, and unprocessed pain. Alcohol doesn't give you a better self. It just numbs the parts that block access to who you've always been. And the longer you reach outside yourself to feel whole, the harder it becomes to remember how powerful your natural presence already is. Here's the hardest truth to face. The internal discomfort alcohol so effectively numbs was never your enemy. It was your guide. The anxiety, the emotional tension, the sense of not being enough, these were never flaws to be erased. They were signals, invitations, sacred messengers pointing toward the very parts of you that needed to be seen, held, and healed. But we live in a culture that doesn't teach us to listen. It teaches us to mute, to push discomfort away, to package pain as pathology, to run from the ache instead of sitting with it. So when alcohol appears with its soft whisper of relief, we accept it. We cling to it. We wrap our arms around it like a life raft, not because we're weak, but because we've never been taught how to swim in the waters of our own pain. And yet, healing has always required discomfort. Not punishment, but presence. The kind of courageous presence that doesn't turn away from the hard stuff. That chooses to stay and feel and breathe, especially when it's messy. Every time you drink to silence that discomfort, you delay the breakthrough it was trying to bring you. You postpone your own return to wholeness. Not because you're broken, but because you're listening to the wrong voice. And it's time to come back home. Coming home to yourself isn't always dramatic. It's not a single moment of awakening. It's a series of quiet decisions, made in silence, in discomfort, in honesty. It begins the first time you pause before pouring. The first time you sit with tension instead of muting it. The first time you let yourself feel the fear and realize you survived it. You start small, choosing presence over distraction, choosing clarity over escape, choosing breath over buzz. At first, it's uncomfortable. The noise gets louder when you stop running. But eventually, you hear something beneath the chaos. A still, steady voice that's always been there. Your own. And you realize that the version of you you've been chasing through every drink, every party, every numb moment, was never gone. Just hidden. Beneath the programming. Beneath the pain. Beneath the assumption that you needed something outside yourself to feel whole. You begin to see yourself with gentleness. Not shame. Not judgment. Just truth. And truth is powerful, not because it shouts, but because it frees. Alcohol didn't make you more yourself. It made you forget where yourself was hiding. And now you're remembering. Slowly, tenderly, courageously. You are not broken. You are not missing. You are returning. This isn't about demonizing alcohol. It's about demystifying it. It's about finally telling the truth, not just the physical truth, but the energetic one. Because when you understand what alcohol really does, how it affects your frequency, your boundaries, your soul, you begin to make different choices. Not out of fear, but out of respect. Respect for your energy, your clarity, your sacred space. You begin to realize that you were never weak for drinking. You were simply never taught what was really happening. You were participating in a ritual without knowing its true cost. But now the veil is lifting. And once you see clearly, you can't pretend you don't. That's the beginning of power. Not control. Not perfection. But awareness. You may still feel the pull. The familiar voice that says, just one to relax, or, it's harmless. But now you can pause. You can feel into that moment with new eyes. You can ask, not from guilt, but from alignment, does this serve my field? My truth? My becoming? That single pause is sacred, and with each one, your field grows stronger. The fractures begin to mend. The distortion clears. You start to feel safe in yourself again, not because you're numbed, but because you're whole. And that, more than anything, is the beginning of freedom. Sobriety in its truest form is not just the absence of alcohol. It's the presence of self. It's what happens when you no longer numb, filter, or perform. When you allow all of you, the joy, the pain, the stillness, the chaos, to be felt fully. Without a mask. Without dilution. Without apology. This isn't about perfection. It's not about living squeaky clean or avoiding all pleasure. It's about returning to the center of your energy. Living with both feet on the ground and your crown wide open. You stop outsourcing your confidence to a bottle. You stop offering your boundaries as sacrifice for a false sense of ease. And you begin to build intimacy from a new place, not from shared escape, but from shared truth. There is a version of you that exists beyond the buzz, beyond the blur, beyond the need to soften every edge. That version is powerful, not because they are always together, but because they are honest. And in their honesty, they radiate something intoxicating in its own right. Presence. Real presence is magnetic. It draws others not because it entertains, but because it resonates. It grounds. It liberates. That's what people are truly drawn to when you stop drinking. Not the absence of alcohol, but the return of you. This isn't about being better than people who drink. It's not about judgment or superiority. It's about sovereignty. It's about reclaiming your field, your space, your energy, your alignment. It's about no longer allowing external substances, external voices, or external scripts to govern your inner state. You begin to notice when something takes you out of yourself. You feel it instantly, how your energy dips, how your thoughts scatter, how your clarity dims. And instead of pushing through or brushing it off, you pause. You protect your alignment, not out of fear, but out of reverence. Because once you've remembered what true clarity feels like, you won't trade it so easily. Once you've lived from a space of coherence, groundedness, and intuition, you become less willing to bargain it away for a 2-hour buzz. This is what no one tells you, that sobriety isn't deprivation. It's reclamation. Reclaiming your body, your attention, your sensitivity, your knowing. You become more intentional about everything, what you consume, who you share energy with, how you move through the world. Not rigidly, not fearfully, but wisely. You stop chasing highs and start cultivating depth. You stop reaching outward and begin listening inward. And that shift changes everything, not just for you, but for everyone who feels your energy when you walk into a room. The truth is, you never needed alcohol to be more fun. You never needed it to be more lovable, more creative, more bold. You were those things before the world taught you to doubt them. Before it sold you a bottle as a shortcut to what you already carried inside. You were never missing anything. You were just disconnected from your own brilliance. That's what alcohol exploits, not your weakness, but your forgetting. It offers you a counterfeit version of the freedom that is already your birthright. And in that forgetfulness, you start to believe that wholeness must be bought, poured, or earned. But now you know better. You know that the feeling you chase when you drink, the laughter, the openness, the ease, isn't coming from the alcohol. It's coming from you. You are the source. And every time you say no, not out of force, but out of remembrance, you rewire that truth a little deeper into your bones. You walk a little taller. You breathe a little freer. You trust your sober presence just a little more. And eventually, you don't just live without alcohol. You live as you, unmasked, unfiltered, undiluted. And that version is more than enough. You don't have to make a declaration. You don't have to call yourself sober. You don't even have to quit overnight. You just have to become more aware. Aware of how you feel, of what you're avoiding, of what you're truly craving beneath the ritual. That awareness, practiced gently, becomes a compass. A quiet truth that begins to guide your choices, not from guilt, but from alignment. And with time, those choices reshape your identity. Not through resistance, but through resonance. You stop reaching for alcohol, not because you're forcing yourself to abstain, but because your body, your energy, your soul no longer want the distortion. You want the clarity. You want the presence. You want you. So you keep walking. One breath at a time. One honest moment at a time. You forgive the past. You soften toward your cravings. You listen deeper and deeper until you remember. You were never broken. You were never incomplete. You were never truly disconnected. You just forgot. But now, you're remembering. And that remembrance is the beginning of everything. Alcohol offered you temporary relief from chronic tension by numbing your system. But true healing doesn't numb. It reconnects. Breath work becomes one of the most powerful tools in this return. Not because it changes everything instantly, but because it reconnects you to something you've forgotten how to trust, your own body. When you breathe intentionally, you invite safety back into your system. You signal to your nervous system that the threat has passed, that you are no longer escaping, but arriving, that this moment, right here, is safe enough to stay in. The more you breathe consciously, the more your energetic system begins to stabilize. Your awareness sharpens. Your emotional state shifts from chaos to coherence. Your body stops bracing against the world and starts relaxing into it. This is where clarity returns. Not all at once, but gradually, like the sun rising after a long storm. The fog lifts. Your intuition flickers back on. You begin to hear the quiet inner voice that alcohol once drowned out. And you don't need to fight for it. You only need to listen, because your body remembers how to heal. Your energy field remembers how to protect. Your soul remembers how to lead. You just have to breathe and not run. Every breath becomes a step back into yourself. And every step is a homecoming. Healing is not about eliminating darkness. It's about integrating it. It's not about forcing yourself into peace, but allowing the chaos to speak. Because the tension you've carried for so long, the unease you once drowned in alcohol, is not trying to destroy you. It's trying to tell you something. Each knot in your chest, each restless night, each wave of discomfort, these are messages. They're signals from the parts of you that were silenced, rejected, or shamed. Not because they were wrong, but because they were too painful to feel at the time. When you begin to face those parts directly, with breath, with stillness, with compassion, they soften. Not because you've defeated them, but because they've finally been seen. This is the healing work alcohol could never offer. Because alcohol teaches suppression, but healing teaches permission. You're not here to silence the pain. You're here to become the space large enough to hold it. And the more you allow those energies to rise without fear, the more they move through you, not to overwhelm, but to be released. This is the true detox. Not just from the substance, but from the stored energy that kept you cycling back to it. You aren't fragile. You're simply learning how to carry yourself fully. The longer you stay present, the more the noise begins to settle. Not because you're pushing it away, but because you've stopped fueling it. Presence is not about quieting your mind. It's about changing your relationship to the mind. You stop trying to fix every thought. You stop attaching to every sensation. You start to watch, to witness, to breathe. And slowly, the space between you and the story begins to widen. You begin to realize that your discomfort isn't permanent. It's a wave. And every wave, when met with breath, eventually breaks and fades. This is where you reclaim your nervous system, not with control, but with rhythm. You're not suppressing. You're syncing. You begin to move in harmony with yourself again. Not rushing to feel better, but allowing better to emerge, organically, honestly. This is where alcohol used to interrupt the process. Right at the threshold of release. It silenced the wave just before it crested, which means the emotion never completed its cycle. It just sank back down, waiting. But now you're staying. You're letting the wave rise, peak, and pass. And in doing so, you teach your body something radical. It is safe to feel. As your nervous system begins to trust safety again, your energy field starts to rebuild. The tiny fractures that once made you vulnerable begin to seal. The static that once clouded your intuition starts to fade. You no longer need alcohol to take the edge off. Because the edge was never the problem. It was the disconnection underneath it. And now, you're reconnecting. Your thoughts feel clearer. Your dreams more vivid. Your sense of timing more intuitive. You begin to notice subtle shifts in how people respond to you. They feel your presence, real, grounded, unfiltered. Because when you return to yourself, you shift the space around you. This isn't magic. It's resonance. You are recalibrating your frequency, and that frequency sends signals far beyond what words can reach. People may not understand what changed, but they feel it. And most importantly, you feel it. This is what healing does. It doesn't just mend. It restores. It doesn't just reduce the damage. It strengthens the foundation. You don't become someone new. You become someone remembered. And that remembrance becomes a light, subtle but undeniable. Not because you're trying to shine, but because you've stopped dimming. The more you live in alignment, the easier it becomes to spot what's false. You begin to notice the difference between real connection and performance, between excitement and overstimulation, between peace and sedation. You feel it in conversations that once felt exciting, but now feel hollow. You feel it in environments that once fed you, but now drain you. Because when you stop numbing, you start sensing again. And your system, no longer dulled by the fog of alcohol, becomes exquisitely sensitive to energy, truth, and subtle shifts. This is your power returning. It doesn't roar. It doesn't demand. It discerns. You walk into a room and feel what doesn't resonate. You sit across from someone and know if their smile is aligned or rehearsed. You scroll a screen and sense what's manipulative, what's performative, what's soul-empty. This sensitivity may feel overwhelming at first, but it's not weakness. It's intelligence. It's your internal compass rebooting, your field remembering its job. To protect, to perceive, to align. This is what sobriety gives back. Not just clearer mornings, but clearer knowing. Not just emotional balance, but spiritual discernment. And in a world built on illusion, discernment is not just helpful. It's revolutionary. One of the most radical things you'll experience in this journey is that you begin to like your own company again. Not because you're distracted, not because you're entertained, but because you're safe with yourself. You sit in silence, not out of discipline, but because it feels good. You walk without music, not because you forgot your headphones, but because your breath is enough. You spend time alone, not to escape people, but to return to your field, your rhythm, your center. This is what alcohol once tried to mimic. The soft ease, the relaxed nervous system, the stillness between thoughts. But now you're creating it for real. Not synthetically, not temporarily, but through presence, through breath, through trust. And this inner trust is what changes everything. Because when you feel safe in yourself, you stop outsourcing your comfort. You stop chasing validation. You stop needing something or someone to make the moment feel complete. You no longer drink to escape yourself, because there's nothing in you that needs escaping. And what remains is something so unfamiliar to modern life that it almost feels like magic. From the inside out. Not achieved, not consumed, simply remembered. Something beautiful begins to happen when you live like this, clear, grounded, whole. You don't need to preach. You don't need to convince. Your presence speaks louder than your words ever could. You walk into a room and people feel calmer. Not because you tried, but because your energy isn't leaking. Your field is intact. Your aura is coherent. Your emotions don't overflow or seek to latch onto others. And in a world addicted to noise, that kind of stillness is magnetic. People may not know what shifted. They may not even ask. But they will feel it. Some will be drawn to it. Some may feel challenged by it. But either way, you are living proof that peace is possible. That joy doesn't require intoxication. That connection doesn't require performance. This is the ripple effect of embodied sobriety. You give others silent permission to come home to themselves, to question their own patterns, not because they were shamed, but because they saw what was possible. You don't need to fix anyone. You just need to be. And that being becomes a beacon. Not because it shines the loudest, but because it doesn't flicker. In a world that profits from your disconnection, your healing is an act of rebellion. Every time you choose clarity over coping, you interrupt the cycle. Every time you choose presence over performance, you restore the grid. Because this isn't just about you. It's about the field we all share. We're not isolated beings. We're energetic nodes in a collective system. And when even one node begins to resonate in coherence, it affects the whole. Your sobriety isn't just personal, it's vibrational activism. You stop feeding the frequency of fragmentation. You start anchoring something new. And others feel it, even if they don't have language for it. They feel safer around you. More regulated, more curious, more seen. Because when you live from your truth, you give them unconscious permission to explore their own. You become a portal, not to perfection, but to possibility. This is why your healing matters more than you think. Not because the world needs another clean person, but because it needs more real ones. Sober, sacred. The freedom you were always chasing through alcohol, it was never on the other side of a glass. It was always waiting underneath your avoidance. True freedom isn't the ability to escape your feelings. It's the capacity to meet them, fully, gently, and without judgment. You no longer need a drink to take the edge off, because you've learned how to soften from the inside. You don't need to chase confidence, because you've remembered who you are beneath the noise. That's real liberation. Not the absence of discomfort, but the ability to stay present within it. Not the removal of challenge, but the return of choice. You are no longer pulled by the cravings of disconnection. You are guided by the intelligence of your own presence. And the most beautiful part? This version of you is not new. It's original. It's ancient. It's the you that existed before the programming, before the coping, before the story. And now, you've returned to it. No bottle in hand. No mask on your face. Just breath. Just being. Just truth. The kind of truth that no system can sell you, and no culture can convince you to forget again. This isn't a war against alcohol. It's a return to awareness. You don't need to shame yourself. You don't need to erase the past. You don't even need to announce your sobriety to the world. You simply live different. You choose different. Because now you see different. Where once you reached for the drink, you now reach for breath. Where once you escaped the moment, you now drop into it. Not because you're trying to be perfect, but because you've fallen in love with being present. You've tasted the stillness. You've felt the clarity. You've remembered the sacredness of your own mind, unclouded, unaltered, unfiltered. And now, you're protecting it, not with force, but with reverence. There will be moments when you're tempted, when the old voice returns, when the world whispers its seductive invitation to numb, to join, to belong. But this time, you'll pause. You'll feel the truth pulsing beneath the surface. And you'll choose accordingly, because this is no longer a battle. It's a practice, a relationship, a path. And every moment you honor it, you come back home again and again and again. You don't need to convince anyone to follow this path. Your life becomes the invitation, not through force, but through frequency. Not by debating, by embodying, by simply existing in your clarity, your softness, your sovereignty. People will feel it. They'll ask questions, quietly or aloud. They'll notice how you stay calm when others spiral, how you feel rooted when others scatter, how your joy isn't loud, but it lingers. They'll wonder what you're doing differently. They'll assume it's diet, mindset, meditation. But the truth is simpler, deeper, quieter. You stopped numbing. You started listening. You gave yourself permission to be fully alive, without filters. And in a world running from itself, that kind of presence is rare. So you keep living, not to fix others, but to show what's possible. You become a mirror, a lighthouse, a frequency that reminds others of what they've forgotten, that their truth doesn't need to be manufactured. It only needs to be remembered. And it starts like it did for you, with a choice, the pause, a breath, a return. And now you've arrived, not at some final destination, but at the beginning of a new way of being. Not a doctrine, not a rule, not a title, but a practice, a remembrance, a quiet revolution. You walk through life differently now, not above others, beside them, not against the world, rooted in it. Sovereign. You're no longer reaching for something to complete you, because you've remembered you were never incomplete. The noise may still exist, the invitations to numb will still appear, but you've found something deeper, more solid, more real. You found yourself, and no drink can offer what you now carry. No substance can replace the radiance you've reclaimed, because this light isn't synthetic. It's soul-born, and it doesn't shout. It doesn't compete. It simply shines. So here you are, present, free. And from this space, you'll go forward, not as someone who gave something up, but as someone who finally came back. Back to truth. Back to self. Back to the quiet brilliance that was waiting all along. With that knowing comes responsibility. Not the heavy, guilt-soaked kind, but the liberating kind. The kind that flows naturally once you've tasted truth. Because once you've felt real presence, you can no longer pretend the imitation satisfies. Once you've stood in your sovereignty, you can't unfeel that alignment. And so you begin to live from it. Not perfectly, not always gracefully, but honestly. You no longer reach for the drink unconsciously. You pause. You feel. You ask, is this coming from alignment or avoidance? That question changes everything. Because now, your actions aren't rooted in habit, but in awareness. You start to recognize the subtle invitations to disconnect. The stress after a long day. The pressure to fit in socially. The quiet ache you used to numb. But this time, you don't abandon yourself. You stay. And in that staying, you build trust, bit by bit. With your body, your nervous system, your spirit. You show yourself that you're safe even when it's uncomfortable. And that trust becomes your new foundation. You're not fighting addiction. You're choosing alignment. And the more often you choose it, the less seductive the old ways become. Not because you've resisted them, but because they simply no longer resonate. This path doesn't always feel grand. In fact, most of the time, it feels simple. It's not fireworks. It's not a dramatic transformation. It's tiny moments, quiet choices, inner shifts no one else may notice. It's turning down the drink, not because you can't, but because you don't need it. It's sitting with your breath for 5 minutes, instead of reaching for noise. It's walking into a room full of distraction and choosing to stay in your body. It's leaving a conversation that drains you, or speaking your truth, calmly, clearly, without over-explaining. These aren't headline-worthy moments, but they're revolutionary nonetheless, because each one affirms something powerful. You're no longer betraying yourself for comfort. You're no longer choosing false peace over real alignment. And that changes everything. You start to experience life more vividly. You notice details you once missed. The colors feel brighter. The pauses feel sacred. The silence? No longer threatening, but holy. You begin to trust the texture of the moment, even the hard ones. Because now you're meeting life as it is. Not filtered, not dulled, not escaped. And in that simplicity, you discover something profound. That presence itself is enough. Over time, you stop thinking about sobriety as a label. It just becomes your way of living. Not something you defend. Not something you explain. Just the natural result of being awake. You stop defining yourself by what you avoid, and start defining yourself by what you embody. You live as clarity. You move as coherence. You show up as integrity. It's not about being perfect. You still feel grief. You still get triggered. You still face fear. But you meet it all from a grounded place. From within your field, not outside of it. And that changes everything. You stop leaking energy. You stop abandoning yourself in moments of pressure. You stop needing something to get you through. Because now, you are the vessel that carries you through. You've become trustworthy to yourself. Not because you've mastered every emotion, but because you've stopped outsourcing your stability. And the world feels that. In the way you speak. In the way you listen. In the way you simply are. You don't need to perform peace. You are peace. And that vibration can't be faked. Because it's born in stillness and sustained in presence. When people ask you why you don't drink anymore, you don't need a long explanation. Because the answer isn't a story. It's a state. It's the way your eyes are clearer. The way your laugh lands deeper. The way you listen, not just with ears, but with presence. It's the way you carry yourself, grounded, available, real. And if they really want to know, you might tell them something like this: I didn't give something up. I just got tired of leaving myself. Because that's what it was, wasn't it? Each drink was a small departure. A tiny exit from the now. The fading from the truth of who you are. And now you've returned. Not once. Not instantly. But moment by moment. You've reclaimed the fragments. You've patched the tears. You've called your energy back. And what's left isn't fragile. It's not broken. It's whole. Because presence doesn't just hold you together. It reveals who you were before the forgetting. And in that remembering, there's nothing missing. There's nothing more to prove. Only this breath. This choice. This life, fully lived from the inside out. You're not alone in this return. There's a quiet movement unfolding all around you. You won't always see it in headlines. You won't always hear it in conversations. But it's there. In the subtle shifts, the silent awakenings, the honest pauses. More and more people are stepping away from what numbs them. Not because they were told to, but because they've begun to feel the cost of disconnection. They're choosing clarity over compliance. Stillness over stimulation. Depth over distraction. They're waking up, not just from substances, but from stories. From scripts. From systems that said, you're not enough as you are. And every time one person chooses to feel instead of flee, a frequency changes. The collective grid recalibrates. The permission expands. The distortion thins. This movement doesn't need banners. It doesn't need branding. It doesn't demand applause. It just needs you. Fully here. Fully alive. Fully clear. Because when even one being remembers who they are, it echoes across the field. And those echoes are how revolutions begin. Not with noise, But with presence, once you begin to live this way, clear, grounded, awake, you don't look back with regret. You look back with understanding. You see the version of you who drank, who escaped, who numbed, not as a failure, but as someone doing the best they could, with the tools they had. You don't shame that version. You thank them, because they carried you until you were ready to carry yourself. That's the shift. You stop making war with your past. You stop dividing yourself into before and after. Instead, you integrate. You welcome every version of you into the circle. The one who ran, the one who reached for the bottle, the one who forgot. Because healing isn't just becoming someone new. It's making peace with who you've been. And in that peace, you reclaim energy that was trapped in self-judgment. You release stories that kept you small. You soften, and that softness becomes your strength. You don't need to explain it. You don't need to prove it. You just live it. With your breath. With your presence. With the quiet confidence of someone who knows nothing was wasted. Everything was leading you here. There comes a moment when you stop seeking confirmation. You stop looking for proof that you're doing it right. Because the validation you once chased, through praise, through belonging, through being understood, starts to dissolve. Not because it stopped mattering, but because clarity replaced it. You now feel it in your body, in the way your nervous system relaxes, in the way your intuition speaks more clearly, in the way your days unfold with quiet alignment. You don't need applause. You need integrity, and you're living it. You're not following a trend. You're following resonance. You're not trying to impress. You're trying to stay in truth. This isn't a performance of wellness. This is a devotion to wholeness. And the more you live from that space, the less you need to explain anything to anyone. People will feel the shift. Some will understand, some won't. But it won't shake you, because your compass is no longer external. It's internal. It's embodied. It's yours. And when that compass is clear, the noise fades, and all that's left is the simple, powerful truth. You're living aligned. You may notice something unexpected as your journey deepens. Peace no longer feels dramatic. It doesn't arrive with fireworks or thunderclaps. It doesn't announce itself with applause. It's quiet, so subtle. It shows up in the way you exhale more often, in how you don't react immediately, in the way silence no longer feels awkward, but nourishing. It shows up in how your mornings unfold without chaos, how you take your time, how your presence lingers in conversations. And the more you live in that peace, the more it becomes your new baseline. Not a goal, not a mood, but a state. Not something you chase, but something you protect. You begin to notice when you leave that state, when a habit, a person, or a story pulls you out of it. And instead of spiraling, you come back. Not through force, through breath, through choice. This is maturity, not perfection. Just the quiet, steady return to what's real. And what's real now is peace. Not because life is perfect, but because you've stopped abandoning yourself in the imperfection. Presence isn't about staying perfectly calm. It's not a frozen state of zen. It's aliveness. It's responsiveness. It's truth. Sometimes it's stillness. Sometimes it's movement. Sometimes it's tears, trembling, laughter, silence. But whatever form it takes, presence always has the same feeling. You're here. Not half here. Not filtered. Not braced or numbed or faking. But fully, honestly you. This is what sobriety has made possible. Not just the absence of alcohol, but the presence of self. The permission to be real. To feel deeply without judgment. To express without performance. To rest without guilt. You're no longer managing your experience. You're living it. That's what most people miss. They think the goal is control. But it's not. The goal is connection. And connection can't happen unless you show up as you are. Not as who you think you should be. Not as who the culture rewards. But as you. Breathing. Present. Unmasked. That is the kind of truth that transforms rooms. And you don't need to say a word. Eventually, presence becomes second nature. You no longer have to think your way into alignment. You live there. It doesn't mean you're always blissful. It doesn't mean you never struggle. It means you meet life as it comes, with open eyes, open breath, and an open heart. When grief arrives, you sit with it. When joy arises, you allow it. When discomfort stirs, you listen. And when peace settles in, you let it stay, without needing to earn it. This is where the journey turns into a lifestyle. Not a temporary phase. Not a detox. But a homecoming that keeps unfolding. You don't wake up every morning wondering, should I drink tonight? That question no longer makes sense. Not because you've fought the urge into silence, but because you've outgrown the question entirely. What used to feel like giving something up, now feels like choosing yourself. And that choice becomes as natural as breathing. No big declarations. No performance. Just the steady rhythm of someone who is no longer at war with their own aliveness. And from that place, life becomes less about chasing meaning, and more about being meaning, breath by breath, moment by moment. At some point you realize, this was never just about you. Yes, your healing was personal. Yes, your clarity was hard-earned. But now it moves beyond your body, beyond your breath. You walk through the world differently, and the world feels it, not in loud ways, but in the soft shifts. A stranger breathes easier around you. A friend opens up more honestly. A loved one rethinks what connection really means. Not because you told them to, but because you became the frequency they forgot they missed. This is how change spreads. Not through pressure, but through permission. You become the example, quiet, embodied, unshakable. Not flawless, but authentic. And your authenticity speaks louder than any lecture. It doesn't ask people to change. It invites them to remember. Because somewhere beneath the distractions and numbing and scripts, they want this too. To feel, to breathe, to be. And your life, your presence, reminds them that it's possible. That no one is too far gone. That every sip of breath is a doorway home. And maybe, without even realizing it, you've become someone else's awakening. This isn't the end of your journey. It's the beginning of a deeper rhythm. You're not finished. You're available. Available to life. To truth. To love that isn't filtered through performance. To pain that isn't avoided, but embraced. To joy that doesn't need enhancement to be felt fully. You've stopped running. And in that stillness, you've found power the world never taught you to trust. Not loud power. Not controlling power. But quiet power, the kind that roots and radiates. The kind that doesn't need to be seen to be felt. This is your life now. Not because you followed a formula, but because you followed your own remembering. No one can take that from you. No system. No story. No voice of doubt. Because your clarity is no longer a moment. It's a foundation. You're no longer chasing escape. You're choosing arrival. And with every breath, you become the kind of presence this world forgot to believe in. Unfiltered. Unnumbed. Unapologetically whole. You are the proof that peace is possible. And the world is better because you remembered.